And with that, let us move on. We have another big topic to cover today. This is related to a huge scoops, putting it lightly, but basically a huge story that dropped, of all places, in the New York Times yesterday on a Sunday. And it's about Bob Iger. And we, of course, will be doing videos about it. It's taken a little while because it's such a massive article. Like, it translates to about 20 pages, so it's a bit to unpack there. And if you've been following our past coverage on Bob Iger and Bob Chapek and the transition between the two, there's not going to be much that's new to you because we will have covered this pretty extensively. But still, what is new is that this is in the New York Times, a publication that does everything in its power to prevent non-subscribers from actually reading it, as you could see right there. But don't worry about that. We have the whole write-up anyway. And also on that note, Packing Protons also said, how many people got an angry call into Iger's office after that article came out? If Dana Walden was part of it, her CEO job in jeopardy. Yeah, getting a little bit ahead of herself there, but the gist of it is that this 20-page behemoth of an article, just like the CNBC piece that we covered in detail last year when that came out, is based on conversations with people in the circle around Bob Iger, and they do not paint a pretty picture of Bob Iger at all. On the contrary, it makes it very, very clear that Bob Iger was always the problem. Bob Chapek did nothing wrong, and the only thing that he actually did wrong was that he wasn't sufficiently a laptop for Bob Iger's liking, because he was always the one in charge. And the only reason he didn't like Chapek was because Chapek wasn't subservient enough to him. We will break down the article in much more detail, but that is the gist of it, and it is now in the New York Times.
When did it come out?
Yesterday.
Well, wow.
So you think there are many angry calls in Iger today?
Oh, Iger's flipping out.
I would imagine so, because I'm surprised we didn't hear anything more about the CNBC article, which came out last year, which said pretty much the exact same thing.
That's true.
But this one adds even more detail, and none of that detail is good for Iger. Because through it all, again, it's a lot to go through here, but through it all, what is made clear is Chapek did nothing wrong. He never did. He always did the best that he could, the best that anyone could do, with a CEO ahead of him that just wouldn't let go, and who was always there behind the scenes, stirring up trouble, undermining him every single step of the way, and for no actual reason, because again, Chapek did nothing wrong. The stuff that it was up for him to manage, he managed perfectly well. Like the Disney share price was at its highest ever, and this was even under the lockdowns. And still, Iger wasn't happy.
Yeah, the issue was, it was higher, not under Iger. That was the issue.
Yeah.
Wait a second. I want some of that higher stuff. Give it to me. You're taking my higher stuff, higher stock stuff. That's no good. I want some of that higher stock stuff. Give it back.
Well, and it also not confirmed, but it added more credence to a lot of the stuff we'd been hearing and Pro had been hearing and other things that were going on at the time. I mean, how basically Chapek had never really had control, as we were implying from the start. And I love the breakdown of when he kind of realized it. I think his wife even said that you're basically Bob's lapdog, I think is another quote out of there, which is interesting. So, yeah.
So does Chapek come out of the woodwork in this particular episode? Because in this article, because we haven't heard from him at all.
No, he can't say anything.
That's the funny thing is who's actually, like, they don't cite the source for this article, correct? They just It's a
No,
Disney
like
insider,
before,
basically,
just
or
like
whatever.
before, they cite insiders, just like CNBC did. I guarantee you that Bob Iger, he's going to have a fairly good idea of who those insiders are. One thing that I was very, very happy with is just like CNBC, they repeat the exact same story of when Bob Iger decided he had made a mistake in appointing Chapek, only they add even more detail to it. And this was on the plane to their very first quarterly presentation. And in the original story from CNBC, they laid it out as Bob Iger wanted to prep Bob Chapek on every single detail of what to say. He wanted to relay, okay, here's the fine detail and here's the fine print and what you need to say. Whereas Chapek was like, but I don't need that. I just like everything is in these papers, right? Well, yeah, but not what I want you to say, was basically what Iger said. And that's when Iger realized that, oh shit, Chapek is his own man, and he's actually going to learn how to run this company and run this company the way that he thinks is best and not the way that I think is best. And that's when Iger started undermining Chapek. That was what was in the CNBC piece. Now, in this New York Times piece, they tell pretty much the exact same story. So they have obviously spoken to the same people who were there on that private plane. So there can't be that many people. But they added even more. So they've spoken with someone else as well. And the additional detail that they added was that when Chapek actually asked Iger for advice to begin with, then Iger didn't want to help him. He just wanted to show pictures of his new yacht and how amazing that was going to be, and his private jet and all of his luxurious wealth and all the money he was burning for his private consumption, and impress him that way. That's when Chapek decided, fine, you're not going to help me. I'm going to go to the back of the plane and study myself. And then only later did Iger decide, okay, fine, I have to go and now drill him to make sure that he says what I want to say. And then continues exactly what they said in the CNBC story. So basically, that additional detail that that the New York Times delivered made Iger look, if anything, even worse and more petty. What's really interesting here is that, I mean, this thing right here, it's coming from the New York Times. This is like one of the many pravdas. This is made the firm foremost of democratic pravdas. This is something that is read by most of the democratic electorate, certainly like the
Oh
elite
yeah, for
of the
sure.
coast. And they are the ones who are greasing elbows with Iger. I mean, it makes me wonder what the hell has happened behind the scenes here for this kind of hit piece against one of their own who has done such a good job for the party to be taken down this way. I'm not saying I have any answers. I just think it's really curious for the new, like CNBC. I can see why they would write a hit piece like that, because consider this: CNBC is owned by Comcast. Comcast Studio is Universal, meaning even if they politically are on the same basic side as Iger, they are corporate enemies. And in the CNBC Iger hit piece, they were taking down a corporate enemy. The New York Times, however, taking down Iger, that's taking down a party man. And the New York Times, very much so, is a party publication. What the hell has happened behind the scenes for that to happen? And I'm not saying that I have the answers. I just think that's real interesting questions. Chato, any thoughts on that? Or Tom, what could have happened for the New York Times to go up against Bob Iger?
So there almost needs to be a story around why this story is coming out now. Because
to me, that's actually more interesting, because there's nothing in this piece that we didn't already know. If you've been watching, like if you're watching John Campea, this is a huge revelation for you, because he's a complete Iger suck up. And for anyone who is watching him and who suddenly read this piece, it's going to be a shocking revelation. But if you've been watching Midnight's Edge, if you've been watching WDW Pro, if you've been watching Valiant Renegade for the last few years, there ain't nothing in this New York Times piece that you didn't already know. Oh, there's some details, but not in the major piece of things. But again, we are against Iger for a reason. This goes straight out to Iger's closest friends and followers.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that is a bigger, more interesting.
Oh, yeah. So to me, the intrigue around again, I view this stuff along the lines of Stalin on the reviewing stand, waving at the Soviet armaments going down Moscow Square, and they keep removing his apparatchiks, airbrushing them out from the stills as he kills them off, or they lose favor with Stalin. I mean, to me, there's just so much story around, this kind of intrigue, because it is the New York Times that is, as you said, is going to have some weight. The people who are on the fence or have contact with Bob, this is going to be a giant embarrassment for them. I mean, I could imagine the next dinner party where nobody is allowed to bring up the article. Don't, whatever you do, don't mention the New York Times.
Yeah, they're going to silence it to death, just like they've done before. But I think it's going to be more difficult to silence the New York Times to death than to silence
why
CNBC.
now? Is something
about
to happen? Is it?
I wonder. Yeah.
Why now?
That's the question that needs to be answered, not the content of the article.
I mean, I sit here and wonder, okay, who's pissed off, right? Because here's me putting on my goggles of how this happens this way, and you get this sort of report. So whoever's reporting this is clearly close to Bob, right? Like they're close enough that you said we even got more details than we gotten before. And whoever this is either has felt this way for a while or has finally come around to the way of seeing that, look, this shit is not working. And Bob is a narcissist who will not let go of power, right? I mean, there's another part in this.
Can I correct you a little bit there, Tom? I don't think that they need to be close to Bob Chapek. I meant
Bob Iger, but okay, go ahead.
The other thing, I think, close to Bob, yes. Just like Emperor Caesar, right? It was the people who were the closest to him.
That's what I mean. I have a feeling this
stabbed him.
Could even be somebody who's in contention to take over the company. And that could be them trying to expedite him out the door.
For the earlier super chatter, if anything, this is where Walden comes into the picture. Not that she's going to look worse for this. If anything, she's one of the conspirators behind this article, trying to rush him out the door earlier.
Yes. And whoever it was either friendly with Chapek or was feeling like Chapek clearly wasn't getting his fair shake at this. Because that's the big overarching thing I got out of this article when we went through it last night on Valiant Renegade, was that Bob is a big narcissist, like a straight up fucking narcissist, right? Like,
kind of have to be in the business.
No, I mean, like, so bad that he cannot even see how, like, this company needs to be saved from him, Paul. Like, he thinks he is the god that's making this thing go round.
Possibly. And let me correct the last thing. I made a narcissist joke. I've actually been privileged to meet several.
Sorry, I didn't catch it. My bad.
No, it's okay. I kind of joked. You made a narcissist thing about Bob, and I said, "Oh yeah, well, all CEOs are narcissists." But the fact is that I was privileged enough on one of my journeys to meet quite a few CEOs of some Fortune 500 companies, and generally, they're not like what everybody perceives them to be. They're actually very down to earth and very smart people. I mean, I assume that there are the. I never met Larry.
Well, they don't have
Ellison.
to be mutually exclusive, right?
No, and I'm sure Bob is smart and very convivial in real life. But there's the fact remains that he's not doing a good job of running Disney. That's just really the bottom line, right?
And that's what I'm seeing here out of this article. Whoever it is, whether it's somebody who used to be in the Chapek camp, somebody who's in the middle of both, somebody who's been close to Bob for years, Iger, I mean, or somebody who's even, who may be up for potentially taking over the company. I mean, who wants to try and take over a burning down house? Right? Because that's literally what they are right now. They're standing in the middle of the room and the house is burning down around them. And Bob's like, this is fine. This is great. Check out that heat. That's free heat, kids.
Does anyone think that when Chapek took over, which was prior to COVID, I mean, no one was thinking of.
No, it was
COVID.
In the middle of.
Pardon me?
It was at the beginning of.
But they didn't know really what the implications were, right?
Yes, they did, and this is actually something that
it's brought up in the article. Yeah,
in this article, how Iger had meetings with Newsom, and it was actually Iger that argued to Newsom that shutting down the Disney parks is the right move. Just let me get the hell out of the CEO seat first.
Okay,
and put another patsy in there.
He abandoned ship.
Yes. This is looking more and more like Chapek was set up to fail from the start. Exactly.
Oh my God! Because I thought he.
And this is in the New York Times.
And this goes back around to what you were saying, Paul. Is as soon as it turned out that wait a minute, this guy's actually making moves that are making the stock go up.
Right.
Bob got jealous, and and this is where I was saying he is such a fucking narcissist. Like, if you read through this article should be put into like textbooks for narcissism, because he is destroying this company simply out of his own ego at this point.
I never thought that when we all joked about the fact we assumed that Deadpool and Wolverine was okayed by Chapek. I don't know any of us.
Maybe
we didn't have hard evidence of that.
Yes, we have heard from sources that have hard evidence that is something that was done. That was Chapek. That was 100% Chapek.
The only one I'm not sure on is Inside Out 2. I think he might have greenlit that.
But Chapek forced through Deadpool and Wolverine.
Okay, well then
here's why I say this.
Yeah, sorry, carry on, Tom.
I was just gonna say, when Bob come out and said we've got Inside Out 2, Toy Story 5, and blah blah blah, Frozen, all these, I think all those were greenlit under Chapek. That was what I was gonna say. Sorry.
Yeah, but the one we know with 100% certainty, we can't have an external thing, but what we have heard from inside sources who swear this is the case, Deadpool happened because Chapek willed it into existence. They had pitched it to Feige like 10 times.
Yeah,
or something.
I heard that.
He had blocked it each and every single time, even tried to talk Hugh Jackman out of it. Then came Chapek, and they went to him once over Feige's head, and he was like, of course we're doing this. And then he basically forced Feige to do it, and it's the biggest hit they have this year.
Isn't that hilarious? Isn't that the biggest hit that Disney has had in years?
And then you can contrast that to what is coming next, which is WandaVision, where the showrunner came out and basically publicly said that, we heard that in San Francisco there were drag brunches in the honor of WandaVision, and we are so fascinated by that
I wasn't invited.
Cooled all of Agatha all along, specifically to please the 25 people who were at that brunch and screw all the other millions of other people. Just for difference in management. And Iger, of course, was perfectly okay with that.
I mean, and then we have, the other things that go on, because we know, I can almost say for certain that Deadpool and Wolverine was greenlit under Chapek because of the simple matter that I believe it was Ryan Reynolds who was saying for years that it was a dead project because they just couldn't see eye to eye on it.
He even said that in the movie. We didn't think this movie was ever going to happen.
Yeah.
That's a dig at Iger and Feige right there for blocking him for years until Chapek forced it through. And by the time Iger came back, it was too much money was already spent that they could stop it. So they just
And the other movies that were either greenlit or at least shot under Chapek, like I can almost guarantee you that's the reason why they did all the reshoot. We know actually now more so that that's the reasons all the reshoots were done on Ant-Man, because Bob came back in after it had been done and he's like, I don't want this. I want it more funnier. Right. I want it this. I want it that. And he's done that, I think, with a few other films too. And then he also made that comment about Captain Marvel where he's like, there wasn't enough oversight. See, we made fun of him on that, but I think what he was saying was that Chapek was letting the creatives go off and create, but he was also holding them responsible. See, that's the part that Bob didn't agree with, right? Bob wanted them to be able to just go off and create and not be held responsible.
Names right now, because we have two Bobs.
I'm sorry, Bob Iger. My bad. You're right. Bob Iger was like, yeah, they don't need to be held responsible for, you know, not selling the toys or making a hit movie, right? Bob Chapek come in, and the first thing he did was reposition things to where the creatives could be creative, but they also had to answer to why these things weren't working, and right?
He had a lieutenant. He had a lieutenant in charge of that too.
And see, that's something Bob didn't like. Bob Iger didn't like.
And I can't remember the guy's name, but he was extremely competent.
He was the second guy, and he was also an executive of color, and he was the second person to be fired. Karim something. Anyway,
you know what we should demand? We should demand the Chapek cut of Ant-Man now. We should get it out there. Hashtag Ant-Man Chapek cut.
And I know for a fact that the director, he has that cut. He is pissed about what happened. He doesn't say anything publicly because he still wants to have a career in Hollywood, and he's smart. But he is very unhappy with what happened to his movie. He's very unhappy with the final cut of it, and he thinks that movie would not have been as poorly received if his pre-Bob Iger reshoot cut had been released. And I don't know that movie would have been all that much better, but it probably would have been a bit better.
Well, I heard it was a more serious movie until Iger got...
Yes, Iger, he went in and he added the completely uneven tone by adding the comedy.
Random comedy, that's what we need.
Like for instance, other bad stuff that may still have been there. Like, I don't know if that insane retard MODOK was that in the original cut.
Oh my God.
Know. Was the daughter an activist in the original cut? I don't know. Probably. That's what I'm saying. We don't know if the original cut would have been that much better, but it would at the very least have been more consistent.
You know what? I can just envision if Gone with the Wind came out now and the Disney executives are going, you know what? This cut is okay, but we need to get a writer to punch it up.
Yeah, well, that's the name of the game in Hollywood. Who can we have rewrite this a million times over? And what they also never do is, even if something, this is what I don't get about the rewriting process. When you have a project that sometimes through bad notes or the bad match between writer and material keeps getting worse from draft to draft, why don't they just cut their losses and scrap the last 10 drafts and go back to the starting point?
I'll tell you why.
Instead of continuing with a shit draft, which is already screwed.
I'll tell you why. And Beetlejuice is a great example of this. And this is why I think that movie has got this problem. And Paul can either disagree or back me up on this after I'm done. The problem is, once you get a script done, and this is the thing, you get 12 actors in the movie, and especially when you got a Michael Keaton and a Jenna Ortega and Michael Willem Dafoe and all these other big people, they all want business to do. They all want to have their specific things in the movie. So what you're doing is you're juggling 500 fucking notes from different people and trying to make this web work. And that's where I feel like that movie is a great example of how this can happen. Where you brought up many times before about the too many cooks in the kitchen, Andre. That's part of it, but part of it is because, so-and-so demands that they want this. So-and-so demands that they won't say this, but they will say this. So-and-so wants this for their character, da-da-da-da-da. And that's something I noticed with Beetlejuice is all these characters in the film, the new characters especially, they've got great business and they're well-defined. But the story's shit, right? So that tells me that they spent a lot, the actors and Tim and whoever else spent a lot of time defining these characters and figuring out business for the actors to do. Like Danny DeVito's a great example of that, right? Like he's just got a small bit part in the movie, but I know more about him than I do any of the cast members of like the Star Trek Discovery. I couldn't tell you half their names, right? So like that's the thing, is you've got all these great actors who want to do all these things and bring all these things to the table, and all that does is mess up the soup. Because now instead of it just being, you know, your basic tomato soup, now it's tomato and, you know, basil soup. And now all of a sudden it's tomato and cheese and basil soup. Now it's potato, tomato, and cheese and basil soup. So yeah.
Movies are always an accident. That has not changed for decades.
No.
So it's just, again,
but when you compare the original Beetlejuice to this, let's say, for instance, like the original Beetlejuice, especially going through the scripts, that movie is almost verbatim what the script is until Michael Keaton comes on screen. Every time Michael Keaton's scene comes in with Beetlejuice, it's like 99% improvisation.
Right. Sure.
So you read that script compared to the movie. So in that film, that was where Michael Keaton was the driving force behind that first film with Tim Burton's vision, pushing him along or giving him that boat to sail on, right? In this movie, it feels like you've got everybody's ideas just thrown in there.
Sure, that's entirely possible. Again, my feeling was that a nervous studio were making way too many notes. You have to understand that.
Well, that's too. You got producers' notes on top of it all. Yeah.
Yeah. The challenge is that this is a funny thing. So if you're not a scriptwriter, you won't really understand it. When you're writing the script, you're confident that you have the final version. And then once it gets close to actually getting into production, you get nervous and you're not confident in what you've written at all. And the chances of it then going through further rewrites only for the purposes of going through the rewrites is very, very high. And that comes from the fact that everybody forgets what their feelings were when they initially read it. Because once you read it 1,000 times, it's no longer funny or interesting. Whatever it was that grabbed you to begin with is kind of lost. So one of the things that I've learned to do, having done it so many times over the years, is that whenever I'm knee deep in something creative, I always go back to what my initial feelings were when I first read it. And I trust those feelings, even though at the point where I'm at now, I'm sick and tired of hearing it. It's not funny, not interesting. You got to dispel that feeling. The problem is executives often don't dispel that feeling. They go, oh my God, I'm no longer enjoying this. Let's get a rewrite. No. Remember your original feelings when you first read it, but very few people have that maturity to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, I have not read the original version of Beetlejuice script to compare it, but I'm just going off of what I'm seeing here. And the fact that the original version of this was written 11 years ago, and you've had the Wednesday writers come in and rewrite it, those same writers that, Jenna Ortega said that wrote stuff that Wednesday wouldn't say, if you'll not forget.
Yeah, but she had to go and basically correct them. Yeah.
Well, they're gag writers.
And, well, if that's the case, then there wasn't very many good gags in this movie.
But either way, this was, however interesting, it was a sidetrack. So what I'm interested to see with this New York Times piece that we started with here is this thing going to have any fallout and consequences?
Right.
Because the only thing that I was very disappointed about with the CNBC article was that we covered it. The people in our circle covered it. The people that were skeptical against Bob Iger got affirmed in, it's not just smoke, there's fire here. Bob Iger is a disaster for Disney, we all know. And all the stuff, 100% of things that Bob Chapek was blamed for was ultimately Bob Iger's fault. Every last one of them, from the Scarlett Johansson lawsuit to everything else, it was all Iger. All along.
Well, this is basically his Biden moment, I would say, really, if you think about it.
I'm very glad that I'm glad that you mentioned that. Let's do this member chat from Dark King. He's been a member for 41 months, saying, how long before Iger gets the Biden voluntarily stepped down treatment? At some point, the bad press has to start to affect the stock price. Then even the plebs will see that he is a liability. Well, the plebs already see that. The problem is that BlackRock and their friends, they're the ones that have to see that. And this is the thing that I'm curious about right now. Should this thing in the New York Times actually be this kind of Biden moment? And for those that, if you are even the slightest bit about doubt about that, no, Biden didn't voluntarily decide for the good of democracy, I'm going to step down. He stepped down because Obama and Nancy Pelosi said, if you don't step down right now, today, we're going to 25th amend you tomorrow, and then that'll be your legacy. And that's when he stepped down.
And I think that's part of the reason George Clooney come out and all that other kind of stuff. And that's kind of why I'm getting the vibe from this here, because I think the other thing that's pointed out in this article is that he's technically there until like 2032 or something like that.
Oh, now. Yeah. Well, he's there until he's
so
dead.
They want him the fuck out. Somebody wants him out and gone. So to me, this tells me that, yes, they went with him and sided with him on the proxy war, or at least he won that proxy war. But what I'm seeing here
I actually wouldn't be surprised if Dana Walden is very active.
Dancing around that. I've been dancing around that. I didn't want to flat out say it, but you did. So now that it's out on the fucking table, yes, that's my prime suspect right now. If I'm a detective on the case, that's my prime suspect who put this out in the press. Because she's... Yeah, go ahead.
Because Iger has been grooming her anyway. That doesn't mean that she has any loyalty to him. Consider this the exact same thing. Before Iger, the guy before him was grooming Iger, among others, to take over the lead. But once he felt ready, Iger took it and stabbed his predecessor in the back. Just like the Sith, right? All the Sith, they are being groomed to take over, but there's no peaceful transfer of power. That happens the moment when the Sith, when the apprentice is more devious than the master and becomes a new master. Maybe that's what we're seeing here. Maybe, just maybe. I'm just considering, because we know this very much thanks to WDW Pro, who's done excellent exposés on this, so kudos for that. However much of a party man Iger may be, Dana Walden is a personal friend of Kamala. That Trump,
oh my God!
However much of a party man, yeah, no, like Doug Emhoff is like the second husband, or like the husband of Kamala. Well, they apparently met through Dana Walden or something like that, so they are tight, close, personal friends. Doesn't matter how senior and apparatchik Iger may be. If I'm just speculating here, I don't know.
Right.
Just pure speculation. But if Dana Walden were to whisper the right words to Kamala and she were to decide, okay, it's time for Iger to go now, how would we see that? We'd be seeing it this exact way.
Girls be helping girls, you know. But no, like at the end of the day, wouldn't it be ironic that if Iger gets ousted with a coup, just like he kind of did to Eisner? I mean,
here's like the thing. This is a very, very important thing, and that is, why has Iger been able to hold on to Disney for as long as he had? Well, that's because there was no peaceful transfer of power. He took it. He essentially launched a coup against Eisner. He basically organized the board against him. He took control over the company. If something is taken, then someone else has to take it from you. This is the problem that Bob Iger faced.
Well,
power, the CEO position was given to him, and anything that is given can be taken away.
Yep.
Anything that is taken has to be forcefully taken away in another coup. And maybe that's what we're seeing here.
The thing that Iger did, and whoever's trying to take his place has to remember, is if you're going to take a shot at the king, you have to make sure you hit him.
Yeah, you better not miss.
Because in this case, I think you're right. This morning, he is flipping fucking tables. Going, who did this to me?
Yep.
Who fucked me? So basically the same exact thing that he did to Chapek is happening to him this morning. The irony of ironies is that's going to be lost on him, right? So he is going to be raging. So to answer your question from earlier, Andre, I guarantee you there is a big fucking one-on-one meeting with everybody this morning. There's a big group meeting this morning. Iger's ripping through people's bullshit, going like, what the fuck happened? How did this? Who did this? Does anybody know anything? What is going on? Like that, I guarantee you that is what like any of the jokings we've had in the past about, you know, after a Star Wars opening or a Marvel opening or whatever, and you know, what the fuck happened, Kevin? Those kind of mornings, that ain't nothing compared to this. This was Nuclear Monday.
And I'm sure he's freaked out as well, because here's like the thing: when something like this happens, he can't fire underlings, because this is a party hit job. Someone in the party wants him out. Because remember, New York Times, it's no longer what it is. It used to be, well, maybe it never was, but it always had the appearance of being an independent newspaper and great journalism and independent investigation. It has stopped being that for years now. Today, it is purely a party publication. This is the party, the Democrat Party, going against Bob Iger. If anything, that is what has him the more worried. This is like what has left me puzzled. And I didn't think that Dina Walden single-handedly would be behind this until we had this conversation right now. That just dawned on me. But yeah, this thing right here, it's not going to be enough for him to do any kind of like cleanup in Disney, because this suggests there's displeasure with him in the party.
That's what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. Because I know everybody's first gut instinct is going, oh, well, this has got to be Chapek's people or somebody Chapek even. It's like, why? Chapek's got nothing to gain at this point. Somebody does.
No, this has nothing to do with Chapek. Chapek is.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, he's just being used as an example. Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. No one here, like none of the people here, well, they may have some personal sympathy, but it's not a matter of him getting his comeuppance or anything like that. No. He is being used as an instrument to get at Iger here.
Yes, it's to show his narcissism and lack of leadership skills. Because it's all about Bob at the end of the day. That's what I keep getting to, and that's what I keep hearing from this article, and that's what I keep hearing from these people.
All about Iger, you mean? Again, we have to stop.
Yes, to be clear, it's Iger the narcissist. When I say narcissist, it's Bob Iger, because clearly Bob Chapek
was not that. No, he
is farthest thing from it. If anything, he was a team player. Like, he's the guy that Bob's like, look, I want to keep my office. I got to have my showers. He's like, sure thing, Bob, no problem. You know, Little Bob, Big Bob. Remember that whole thing? That's even brought up in there.
Here's the irony. If Bob Chapek had been just allowed to completely run Disney, this is the man that gave us Deadpool and Wolverine, Disney would have been in so much a better state right now. That company would have been on the way to getting back again instead of sinking further into oblivion, because that's where Chapek was taking it.
Yeah, and I get it. He wasn't popular when it came to the parks. I totally get it. But as we've pointed out, sometimes there's this certain people that they're the right person for the right place at the right time. We keep bringing Tom Rothman up as the perfect example of that, right? Because you and I, we used to make so much fun of that poor bastard for all the shit. I mean, even Ryan Reynolds made fun of him publicly, right? But that guy went from being the worst thing that ever happened to Fox and X-Men and Deadpool over there to being the best thing. Tom Rothman, didn't I say that?
You said Ryan Reynolds.
No, I know, but Tom Rothman.
But I said, I did. But I said even Ryan Reynolds had a crack at him. Remember the whole "Hi, Tom"? Right. Yeah, that was him saying to Tom Rothman, "Yeah, fuck you," basically.
Yeah.
That he went from there to Sony, and he's basically single-handedly brought Sony back from the brink.
Yeah.
Right. And it's because of his everything that he did wrong over at Fox, he's doing right for the most part over at Sony. The only thing he can't seem to get right is his basic problem. And that is the comic book, sci-fi, IP-driven shit. Look, that's his weakness. So he needs to bring in somebody who knows that kind of shit, obviously, or he needs to step down.
That's what he needs, ironically.
Yeah, he needed a James Gunn at that time, but at this point, I think he's either done everything he's going to be able to do for Sony. Now's the time where Tom should be thinking about retirement. But that's just a good example of how some people can get out of the way of their ego sometimes, or at least, because he even said that in an interview. He's like, look, I never understood these superhero movies, right? And somebody had to explain it to me. He even said that specifically. Right? And sometimes that's what it takes, is the right person to sit down and get your attention, right? Like Andre, for me, you're that sometimes, I'm sure everybody has that person in their life where, just can't seem to hear the same thing from 100 different people, but coming from that one person, the way they explain it to you, it just seems to sound right and make sense to you. Right.
Yeah.
So
this is what happened with Biden. Like, the right person to tell him was Pelosi saying, leave today or be 25th Amendment tomorrow, and that made the difference. So,
yeah, but Iger's not going to go without a fight. See, that's the big difference.
Yeah.
Chato, I think Iger wants to leave a legacy. This is not a good.
His legacy is cooked.
I think so too, and it seems that I remember that as much as Eisner was kind of vilified at the end of his run. He didn't have a lot of love for Iger.
No, and that's what Andre was referring to, is that even though he was being groomed, I think Eisner seen a little bit of it coming, and then when they were in the thick of it, like, that was like some really backbiting shit going on back then. Like, that's a Midnight's Edge video in the waiting to happen some point.
And the thing is, what did Iger do? Iger did two things. One, he created live version of existing properties, and then he bought 3 big properties and ruined them. So there was nothing I think he created from scratch per se.
Yeah, I would say that he is the perfect embodiment of the true legacy of the Dark Knight, which is this one quote. Like, you either die young enough to become a hero, or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. I botched it, but you catch my drift, right? If Bob Iger had retired in 2015, 10 years into his reign, he would have gone down in history as the greatest CEO in Disney history, because then he would have acquired Pixar, he would have acquired Marvel, he would have acquired Lucasfilm, and as of 2015, they were all smash hits. If he had left in the aftermath of the release of The Force Awakens, which was one of the biggest hits of all time, his legacy would have been secured. That's when he needed to step down and have someone else with fresh blood come in and prevent all of those companies from going down the drain. And most importantly, do not freaking buy Fox, because that was one of his single biggest mistakes. Instead of realizing that now I have done all I can for the company, my vision and strategies, they worked, but now someone else needs to go and maintain and make sure that.
If you're riding high of a massive hit, that's the last moment that you're
but that's the problem.
No, but he didn't learn anything from Eisner's era.
Then of course, let's not forget about his other massive success, Disney Plus.
Very good point. But anyway, here's the thing. Because he is riding high. But you know what happens when you're riding high? When you ride high, that's when you are at the peak. Now, you do not know, is the peak right now? Is the peak in a year?
Oh, you don't know.
That's exactly it. You don't know. But what happens after the peak? Well, then comes the fall. And he stayed so long that he got to experience the fall and the collapse. And what he also did was that his acquisition strategy, it had worked. But here's the thing with things that work. They work and they work and they work until they suddenly don't work any longer.
Right.
And when they don't work any longer, they're going to stop working at the worst possible time. And that was with the Fox acquisition. And they lost more on that than they gained on any of the other.
It should never have been allowed. I mean,
no, it should never have been allowed.
Never should have been.
By that time, there was no one to oppose him because he had replaced everyone on the board. There was no board, and this is the one thing that regret that no one paid more closer attention to, because Disney, honestly, if there was any kind of functional legislation where corporations are concerned in America after that CNBC piece, Disney needed to be put under public administration, because a company that size needs to have a board unless it's taken off the market and it's gone fully private, like Elon Musk did X. Then it's a different matter altogether. But that's not what happened here. Disney pretends to be a company with shareholders and a board, but it doesn't actually have a board, because the board doesn't function, because they're all appointed by Iger, and he is not beholden to the board. On the contrary, the board is beholden to him, and the board shields him from the shareholders. There's a fundamental dysfunction there, which is another reason why he needs to be ousted. And then the entire board needs to be ousted as well. Not only do they need to be ousted, in my personal opinion, they need to be prosecuted and sued. I'm not joking.
Oh,
I'm not joking.
I agree with
For
you.
violation, they need to, if it's not an official matter, I don't know that yet, but they all need to be sued, every last one of them.
They have abandoned their fiduciary duties.
Exactly. There needs to be a class action lawsuit against Bob Iger and against every single motherfucker who has served on that board the past 5 years, because they have all been in direct violation of their fiduciary duties. And you just need to look at what has happened to the Disney share price. Did the shareholders have any kind of say? Did anyone represent the shareholders when they agreed to buy Fox? How much have the shareholders lost just in the shareholder value? Consider from Chapek's reign, when the share price was $200 at the height, and now it's hovering around 90 somewhere. They've lost more than half their value, and they've done it because of Iger's idiotic decisions that their shareholders all signed off on, and they don't have any stake in the company.
This clip was taken from Midnight's Edge in the Morning, which streams live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time on the Midnight's Edge main channel. There, you can send in your live questions and comments before clips and full stream replays are uploaded to Midnight's Edge live archives. We are also on Twitter, Rumble, Odyssey, and Facebook, so smash that like, help share, subscribe, and join us.